Hello everybody. This is a screencast on Flannery O'Connor's A Good Man is Hard to Find. We're rolling into that postmodern um, modernism unit there. And so this really fits really well within those parameters, those characteristics that we talked about. So what we have in our story is we have a really a self-righteous, stereotypical Southern Christian grandmother here who is quick to pass judgment. She is hypocritical. She's two faced. She thinks she's better than everybody else, morally superior, and reminds everybody of that all the time. And doesn't really kind of reflect on her own hypocrisy and her selfishness and her dishonesty. And so, what we have here is we have she's traveling with her family, and which is her only son Bailey, his wife, and their three children: John Wesley, June Star, and the baby. The baby doesn't have a name; it's just the baby in the story. And so she doesn't even want to go on this trip. Like they are going to Florida. She doesn't want to go to Florida. She wanted to go to East Tennessee, and so she's kind of miffed about that. And she makes her opinions about it known. She'd prefer to go and in order to do and to try to convince Bailey, her son, her only boy, she reminds him or informs him that down in Florida there is a criminal on the loose by the name of the Misfit. He's freed himself from the federal pen and he's headed towards Florida, and she's like, look at what I did to these people and read it. And she said, I wouldn't take my children in any direction with a criminal like that a loose in it. I couldn't answer to my conscience if he did. And so Bailey like barely looks up from what he was doing, and he's like, yeah, we're going anyway. We're fine. We're good. And so then she tries a different approach. She tries to approach the mother, who she claims looks like a cabbage. Um, yeah, so is her judgment kicking in. And she says, the children have been in Florida before. You ought to take them somewhere else for a change so they can see different parts of the world and be broad. They've never been to East Tennessee. And then, you know, they're like, no, we're still going to Florida. So she loses out. So she's mad about it. They don't change their plans. She secretly brings her cat along in the car, which I don't know if you've ever been on a road trip with a cat, but they're not really good traveling companions. So that just stick that in your hat for a little bit later. We're gonna come. The cat's gonna come back up in a little while. Okay, so they're driving the whole time. She is literally like chastising the children and complaining, and the little boy John Wesley is like, they're having this conversation about the misfit, and John Wesley is kind of knocking their home state of Georgia. He's not being respectful, and she chastises him for that. And she's just very judgy. She's very judgy. I don't think that I'd want to go on vacation with her anyway. They should have left her at home. So they stop for lunch at a place called Red Sammy's. It's a famous barbecue restaurant. And so they've been driving for a while. They pile out. And so grandmother starts having a conversation with Red Sammy about about the lack of goodness in the world, and that the world is like changing, and like there's nothing they can do about it. And so they're over and all, like they're just they're both commiserating. Her and Red Sammy are commiserating on the fact that a good man is like hard to come by. It's hard to come by in the world. There's no more goodness. People don't live moral lives anymore. She makes several racist conversations and whatnot. And so after lunch, they start driving again. And when they're driving, the grandmother thinks that they're near this plantation this she once visited when she was younger. And so she wants to kind of see it again. And so she tells the kids, in order to get them interested in going, that the house had like a secret panel. And so there was like, oh, a secret panel. Let's all go to the plantation. And Bailey, who is like my dad was, like, we got to make good time, right? He's like, oh, I guess we can go. So they drive down this dirt road, and as they're driving down the road, the grandmother realizes that, yeah. So This is not the plantation that she remembers. It was in Tennessee and not in Georgia. So they are, she's kind of embarrassed, obviously, because she has sold these kids on this house, but the house that she remembered was in Tennessee. So she's a little embarrassed. She kicks over her belongings, releases the cat. There it was. It's popping back up now. Releases the cat, which jumps onto Bailey's head and causes the car to have an accident. So here they are. They're on the side of the road, and the car is wrecked. They've got a screaming baby. They're in a ditch. The the she had a cut on her face, a broken shoulder, thank God nobody's dead kind of thing. And grandmother gets out of the car with her hat pinned to her head, but broken front brim standing up at a jaunty angle, and the violet spray hanging off the side, which kind of shows us that she's still valuing these superficial values. They're very ridiculous and flimsy. She portrays herself as a good woman, even down to the way she dresses. She made several comments about the way she was dressed in the story. So here they are, side of the road, in the ditch. Everybody's shaking, waiting for a car to come along. This must be the time before cell phones. So a car slowly approaches them, and the misfit and two young men get out. So the misfit is this stereotypical criminal. He's a bad guy, an illiterate, a violent hick. Someone who has just made a lot of wrong choices in life. But you know what? He owns up to them. He doesn't, view things the way. I mean, he really takes the loss of life and murder very flippantly. So the grandmother recognizes him, and she tells him, she's like, "Oh my God, it's the misfit." And so the misfit, the two young men that are with the misfit, get out, and they take Bailey and the son, the young boy, to off into the woods. John Wesley. They take him off into the woods, and um, they take him off, and um, she is like, um, still trying to like um, cling to her goodness and her moral value, and she's like, I know this is the killer or whatever, and it talks about her reaching up to adjust her hat brim and whatnot, and so they're standing there, and the shots are heard. Okay, and so she knows that all of at once that they're dead. And the two men come back. They get the wife and the child, the young girl, June Star, and they get the baby. And they take them off into the woods and shoot and kill them as well. Well, this whole time, the misfit is standing there, and she's like, "Oh, you're the misfit. I recognized you at once." And he says, "Yes, but it would have been better for all of you, lady, if you hadn't have recognized me." Recognized. So they engage in this discussion. Mind the fact that, their whole family has been like just murdered out in the middle of the woods. So they're all dead except for her, and she's standing there, and so they engage in this like discussion, her and the misfit. They engage in a discussion about goodness and Jesus and crime and punishment. And the misfit that engages her with this conversation because he doesn't really view actions as right or wrong. It's something that he does, and if that others consider it wrong, he gets punished, but that's it. Like, he acknowledges that praying to Jesus might save him, but he claims like he doesn't need that kind of help. He says, I'm doing all right by myself. And so his attitude is really kind of apathetic to morality, to religion. um but his frustration with his lack of faith in the story suggests that he's given Jesus a lot of more thought than the grandmother really has. Um, and they talk for quite some time, and so here's the grandmother, and basically she is lying, flattering, begging for her life, telling him that she knows he's a good man and treating him to pray. And she says, if you would pray, Jesus would help you. And he's like, that's right. He says, well, why don't you pray? And he says, I don't want no help. I'm doing all right by myself. And so he's not going to pray. Then she switches tactics. She entreats him not to shoot a lady, right? As if not murdering somebody is just kind of a question of etiquette here. And she reassures him that she can tell that he is not a common man. He's not a bit common, as if his lineage somehow correlates with his morality. But none of that really works, right? So he's just like really a bad guy. So he says, or at the very end, like right at the very end, let me go to where I want it to be. He says, Jesus was the only one that ever raised the dead. The misfit continued, and he shouldn't have done it. He's thrown everything off balance. If he did what he said, then there's nothing for you to do but throw away everything and follow him. And if he didn't, then it's nothing for you to do but enjoy the few minutes you've got left the best way you can by killing somebody or burning down his house or doing something other meanness to him. No pleasure but meanness. And she says, maybe he didn't raise the dead. And he says, I wasn't there, so I can't say he didn't. I wish I'd have been there. It ain't right I wasn't there, because if I would have been there, I would have known. Listen, lady, if I'd been there, I would have known, and I wouldn't be like I am now. And she says, uh, his voice seemed about to crack, and the grandmother's head cleared for an instant. She saw the man's face twisted close to her own, as if he were going to cry, and she murmured, why, you're one of my babies. You're one of my own children. She reached out and touched him on the shoulder. And so this is kind of like, um, widely confused, like widely discussed among critics, but it's possibly indicating that maybe she's finally recognized that they're all connected. She may finally kind of understand that there's no such thing as a good man, but there are is good in all of us, and there's also evil in all of us, including her. It might be her one and only chance that she's grasping at for redemption for the way that she's lived her life and how hypocritical and judgy she's always been. And so, like, her head is cleared for an instant. So that we should read that as kind of like the truest moment in the story, like her moment of grace. And the misfit's reaction also suggests that she may have touched on a nerve. He springs back as if a snake had bitten him. So here he is, somebody who openly rejects Jesus. He recoils from her words and her touch and fires his gun. He literally shoots her 3 times in the chest. And then he puts his gun down on the ground, takes off his glasses, and begins to clean them. And then the two, Hiram and Bobby Lee are their names, they return back from their, bloody errand. And he says, take it when they come back, his eyes are red rimmed and pale and defenseless looking. Take her off and throw her where you thrown the others. She was a talker, wasn't she? Bobby Lee said. She would have been a good woman, the misfit said, if it had been somebody there to shoot her every minute of her life. So both characters, like by the time of their oh, I forgot something important. So even though, like, as she's dying, that was what was important. So when she's dying, her body is twisted and bloody. She dies with her face smiling up at the cloudless sky, as if something good has happened to her, if she's finally kind of realized something important, kind of a moment of grace. So only when the grandmother is facing death does she realize she's gone somewhere wrong in life. She's acted so superior throughout the entire story, but she recognizes at the end that she's kind of flawed like everybody else. She sees that both her and the misfits are sinners, like they're in need of grace. And by seeing him as one of her own children, she's offering him unconditional love and acceptance and forgiveness that should transcend what he has done. Okay. O'Connor was a devout Catholic, and so there was this whole idea of even if you feel love to somebody that you should hate, even in an instant, that's what grace is called, and it's something that God gives us in order to deal with people. So the grandmother is would never have come to those kinds of terms on her own without facing that situation that she was in. And so she's developed and grown more in that one moment than she had her entire life. And so she dies peacefully within those confines. I'm going to pick back up here in just a minute. I've got like just a couple more minutes to talk, and then I'll be done.